Welcome, everyone. My name is Philip Mondor, President and CEO of Tourism HR Canada, an industry organization with a mandate aimed at building a world-leading tourism workforce. Tourism HR Canada facilitates, coordinates, and enables human resource development activities that support a globally competitive and sustainable industry and foster the development of a dynamic and resilient workforce. Today's webinar, Building Strategic Community Partnerships, will be 1 hour long. It will be recorded and available on our website for download following today's session. You can download a PDF copy or listen to the full presentation. The PowerPoint deck will include a URL link to everything we feature here, so you can go deeper or check it out if it piques your interest. You will receive a follow-up email tomorrow with a link to this webinar series and other related tools. Do visit our website for more detail on the research or the links to TourismRecovery.ca that has other resources. Today, Heather will be monitoring the Q&A section and chat features. Where possible, she will answer your questions along the way, but if we don't get to all of them before the end of our hour, we will ensure that the answers to the questions are included in the follow-up. If for any reason there's a disruption today and the webinar cannot continue as normally planned, we will follow up with the complete narrated webinar for you for your personal viewing after the session. So let's get started. Professional acknowledgement by the Government of Canada, for which this webinar would not be possible without the support and their funding. This work is part of TourismRecovery.ca initiative. TourismRecovery.ca was launched by Tourism HR Canada in June to help the sector respond to COVID-19 crisis by providing timely information and practical tools at no cost. We'll learn about the website and information and tools that are available for free as we go through this session. Tourism businesses have asked for webinars to help guide them through some of these big topics. Today's topic is on building strategic community partnerships. Tourism revival and growth is dependent on the ability of tourism businesses to engage in community-led strategies. This webinar will look at how to harness resources to create a destination that is ready and willing to accept visitors. The session will include tips on building consumer confidence that will help bolster the efforts made by tourism businesses to be safe and welcoming. We have a lot to cover in our 1 hour today, so I'm going to jump right into it. I'll start with drawing your attention to one of the checklists on TourismRecovery.ca. This one's called Build Strategic Community Partnerships. Like all other checklists, these are free and downloadable so that you can work with them and change them as you like. A key message today is the essential need for community partnerships. As we emerge from the pandemic and enter the era of new tourism, one thing is very clear. We need to rebuild by engaging the community. Tourism businesses have an opportunity to serve as leaders in this pursuit and will benefit from an improved stability, profits, and ultimately resilience. Community partnerships will do more than help recover from this pandemic. It will also help businesses manage through future business disruptions. So what is a partnership? What are we talking about? Why does this matter? Establishing partnerships is a way to develop businesses and to develop revenue opportunities and to share or secure strategic alliances that will help you, tourism businesses, succeed. As a tourism business, you have a lot to offer. And in some communities, you are the economic anchor for the community who rely on you. What you have to offer, like quality products, specialized skills and expertise, key assets that can grow the economy and more, will help you tap into benefits others can also bring to the table. You can take advantage of partners' resources or expertise. You can share costs, particularly where the long-term development or maintenance will be very costly for you to sustain on your own. Partnerships enable you to be more competitive and to react more effectively to market needs and different consumer expectations. It will also help you position your destination as a global one where you can attract new visitors, especially when we come out of this pandemic, when travelers will be looking for unique places to go. Partnerships are also a way to reduce risk. When you enter into new ventures, you're helping share the challenge of moving into these adventures and reducing your risk by sharing the different commitments that go along with it. So partnerships are joint ventures or alliances characterized by common interests or goals. Partnerships always include opportunities for each partner. Partnerships also are a way of leveraging resources and reducing or sharing risks. Partnerships are founded on cooperation, trust, and commitment, and often with the objective of establishing a long-term relationship. Partnerships may include private or public groups, for example, businesses, industry associations, or government agencies. So when you, so let's take a look at a little more information about why we engage in partnerships by looking at this slide. There are a few basic reasons why you may choose to seek a partnership. As we've said, some of these are increased profits and finding ways to increase your revenues. It probably also gives you access to new and larger markets and the ability to gain greater market penetration. And partners will have expertise or services that are needed in which you cannot serve on your own. If I look at an example we captured from heritagedestination.com, where they have a site that talks about the benefits of partnerships, they include things like partnerships provide cost sharing for construction projects, exhibition projects, marketing services, staff training, development of new product, and so on. They say partners provide credibility for some projects by having the right names associated with them. And they provide expertise that may not be available in your own business. And it helps cut costs in marketing and advertising. A very similar message on the value of strategic business partnerships we've also collected from a group called InfoNote. And they say things like, it helps you access new customers. It's an opportunity to reach new markets and sectors. There's added value proposition for your existing customers. It helps you build brand awareness and trust. It expands your reach, geographic reach. You have shared resources. All of these are pragmatic reasons, should be persuasive enough, but there is another reason I want to talk about. This one is focused on the need for tourism to regain consumer confidence. By consumers, I mean the community, your customer, suppliers, citizens, anyone in the visitor region you serve. COVID has taken a hit on this sector, and we know that not all communities are keen to have travelers enter their region for fear of the pandemic. One of our main concerns with recovery is building consumer confidence and getting communities to welcome the tourism industry back as the economic anchor, and to get over the idea that visitors are no longer a risk. Community is your competitive advantage, creating a sense of connectiveness, belonging, mission, and meaning. It's all about working towards a shared mission, creating a sense of shared accountability, and setting values that will help your businesses thrive. Tourism businesses taking a lead on building community benefit greatly. They benefit from influence, leadership, improved collaboration, shared risk, and resources. Engaging the community is about rebounding faster, smarter, and in a way that is more resilient and responsive. Successful communities have a shared sense of purpose and values. They are focused on the same goal. Tourism businesses are seeking to get consumer confidence. and support for economic and social development that embraces tourism as the anchor. By the way, our research team identified a BC government initiative with attributed some $14 million, and this targeted tourism development partnership initiative is being held in the 6 tourism regions in BC to help the industry recover from COVID. And Destination Canada is partnering with provinces so provinces can support local tourism development needed as a result of COVID, taking into account the willingness of communities to welcome travelers back, among other factors. Here's my point. Both at a provincial level and at a national or federal level, we're starting to see the awareness on the need for tourism businesses to partner with communities as the strategy for revival. Bottom line, community engagement and partnerships are part of the new tourism era, part of a new business model that will ensure tourism will thrive. Now, a quick note on a few items on this slide. Some of the main reasons tourism businesses have established partnerships are because of the items you see listed here. Marketing, helping build worker plans, and we'll look at a clear example of that, helping drive some common interests in terms of policy or advocacy to bring dollars to the region to help revive tourism, shared investments in infrastructure, things around staff training, seeking funding collaboratively is always more successful than trying to do it individually, sharing services and resources, and indeed I've mentioned others in some of the previous notes. Okay, now I've mentioned community in the previous slide, but just what does that mean? Just what is community? Well, there are 3 perspectives we're going to draw on: the physical community, the virtual community, and professional affiliations. Let's look at this in a little more depth. In terms of the physical community, partnerships this is probably the one that you're most likely thinking about. So partnerships come about through community links. It's through these contacts that you identify opportunities. The physical community is probably the one you think about when the word is mentioned. The examples I have on the screen define a bit of what we're referring to here. Now, a little side note. It's not to assume that all communities will be suited to tourism or want tourism. If I cite a message directly from a guide to community tourism planning in Nova Scotia, we are reminded that some communities are not well located for tourism and or have limited appeals to visitors. And in some communities, some residents may be opposed to tourism if they think more visitors might negatively be impacting their quality of life because of things like more pressure on infrastructure, such as roads or services, or the competition for visitors for basic things like the recreational activities that they can benefit from. Now, this message is not meant to rule out the idea of engaging the community in tourism planning. It's through the meaningful engagement that the community can explore possibilities and determine if or how tourism can best be achieved. Not every community will have enough demand generating experiences to be a destination in its own right, but perhaps working with other communities in your region will do the trick. And where communities are not destinations themselves, they can still benefit from tourism by providing services to travelers en route elsewhere. But another kind of community we're going to talk about here is the virtual community. This is something we've all come to know well, especially in the last 8 or 10 months, just as we are doing here today in this virtual community. Our experiences and reliance on technology shows how important it is for tourism businesses to engage in the virtual community. Technology-based communication platforms are ubiquitous. They are the most common and universal form of communicating today with global reach. They're accessible, they're ever-changing and expanding, they're seemingly boundless. Think of the smartphone alone. One article alone indicated that more than 50% on this planet have a smartphone to work with. Now, virtual communities are key to visitors building relationships with your brand, the potential for a deeper interaction and the ability to feel being part of your actual community is possible in these means. We'll see some good examples of this as we move through the presentation. And the third type of community we refer to here, I'm calling industry and professional affiliations. This is a very important community. I think of this one as the friends and family category. It's all the professional network that you are part of and have learned to lean on or rely on. Engagement benefits are both business centered, such as helping with marketing coalitions or finding ways to reduce costs through bulk purchasing. But it's also about professional development and keeping up with the latest trends and issues that may impact you. These are essential to business survival and growth. Some of those ideas were presented in the last webinar if you want to know more about them. Now, I want to do a brief shout out to some of those groups that I'm talking about. And there are many more than what is on this slide. These groups and others have done some amazing work during the COVID crisis period. I see it daily. If you're not familiar with it, I do suggest you check out their websites or give them a call. It should be top of your list to check it out. You may also want to check out other national associations like ACTA, the Association of Canadian Travel Agencies, or FAME, Festivals and Major Events Canada, or CAFE, the Canadian Association of Fairs and Exhibitions, or the Culinary Federation, or even the Canadian Association of Exposition Management, and many more. And please do not forget about the provincial and territorial associations, or the provincial and territorial human resource organizations, indeed the DMOs. There are many more that are not, that could spend a whole hour just listing them. But what's clear is that these are all groups with mandates that are designed to serve your interests. If you're not already connected, I implore you to go and check them out. They're all eager to help in many ways, especially on some of the matters related to COVID recovery. I'm going to bring you back to the last webinar for a moment. We'll segue into how tourisms have established successful partnerships. But to kickstart this and looking at these examples, I want to first revisit a slide from the last webinar, which was called Creating New Revenue Strategies. Some of you will be familiar with this. This slide is to provide a bit of additional context. We used this to describe what the new world looks like, something to keep in mind as we go through the rest of this deck, because as you change your business practices, it'll help you identify the kinds of partnerships you're looking for and help you respond to this new environment. I can help you think about, now, let me just walk through this very quickly because I don't want to repeat as much detail as I had last time. But here are some of the key features of what has changed in the new consumer marketplace. Many of you will recall this. The focus, of course, going from a global network that we've gone and international visitor base that we used to try and attract to having to focus very locally. And moving from mass tourism to actually focusing on a quality tourism product. Also, making sure that we tailor our services and are more flexible. We know that our markets need to diversify, not just for dealing with our current situation, but in the long term. Consumers, of course, are looking for safe and hygienic practices. And a big push we're seeing in the trends is the move towards far more ecologically friendly practices. These are all markers for the way we know businesses are shifting and changing, partly out of necessity, but also out of demand. And so these are some of the very features we need to think about as we evolve our own businesses in order to survive, but also to think carefully about what partnerships we need to help us do this. As that article said last time, the three things to keep in mind is that our new business is going to be responsive to visitors who are looking for certainties, confidence, and customized needs. So let me just show you a few examples that we've looked at that bring up a number of these ideas that we've talked about with respect to community partnerships. This first one I find really interesting. Here's our first example from Singapore. Now I'm going to read directly from their website a passage. I think it's well written and gives a good feel. So Better Barista Coffee Academy is a leading provider of specialty coffee education. At the heart of its business is a social program that arms disadvantaged women and at-risk youth with vocational and life skills that pave the way for long-term careers in the specialty coffee industry. They go on to quote the woman who leads this. She says, social initiatives that underscore every aspect of our business include a holistic vocational wellness program that provides professional certification and micro enterprise opportunities for marginalized women and at youth risk. Since 2011, we've helped generate over 1.1 million in salaries for more than 80 program graduates, supporting more than 180 of their dependents. And it goes on to say a whole lot more about their business model. But here we see a clean and clear innovation. They're much more than a coffee house. They are a social hub doing very social-based activities that are helping both economically, but also with the vibrancy of helping address some of the groups that are underrepresented in the sector. So this is a business that will continue to thrive because it's serving far more than the coffee consumer. Another example featured from the same website, because they are also an award winner, is closer to home. This is from a business in Toronto called Paintbox Catering and Bistro. Again, I'll read directly from the website. Paintbox offers catering services with a strong environmental mandate, as well as training, career, and business development opportunities supported through a street-level retail, cafe, and bistro. The owner goes on to comment that our company was founded on a core mission of training and career development. We have targeted our hiring specifically to low-income communities and individuals with systemic barriers to employment. We always promote a sense of inclusiveness and justice in the organization and in our relationships with customers, suppliers, and the community. We develop trust and support from the local community through evaluation of their needs and the developing of the business interests. Focus on shared core values, become a business that works for everyone. So this really underscores a lot of the messages that we had for today's webinar. The community approach is one that is linked to the needs of the community, engages the community, they are part of the business model, and they transcend just the sort of functional aspects of the business. In other words, like it's more than a restaurant in this case. It's a training center. It's a career development center that not only helps the community, but it's ensuring that the business can thrive, have the right types of workers, provide excellent service. And socially, they're doing a lot for the community, which is well supporting of their efforts. Flipping to another example, I'm going to talk about a fly sheet, a 2-page fly sheet that was produced by a regional agency to help fisheries and tourism businesses learn how to partner effectively. This simple fact sheet is quite succinct, but it really, I could imagine, was very helpful for helping these businesses create the kinds of partnerships that they saw would be very beneficial. The angle here is grounded again in a community approach, and it's matching 2 different industries. Again, I should remind you that the links to all these examples will be included in the PowerPoint for download, so you can see more than what we're presenting in the slide deck. Here, they talk about some very pragmatic options: informal cooperation, or joint promotion, or package services. And that gives people a way to onboard in different levels, depending on what works for them. And it's simple. It's picking up on existing resources, and it's helping people tailor how they can work. But it's giving them very practical examples on how that can be done. So for example, informal cooperation, they refer to as businesses can start to just learn to recognize and recommend each other, share some information, do things like social media posts jointly, produce joint brochures, make sure staff are invited to know about the other experiences by having them experience those other businesses, that kind of thing. Joint promotion takes it a step further as they go on to describe, but you can get fairly sophisticated with certain packages and the like. So a community-based approach just strengthens the capacity that's available for both of these. Another example of that is drawn from this US example. And I know there are very similar ones of these types of models in Ontario, Nova Scotia, and BC, because I have toured all these wine regions and had enjoyed the wine in those regions while experiencing this tourism opportunity, just like you see here. So it's good to see that sometimes it's good to see what the competition is doing, but I can tell you that in Canada, we're doing some very good things like this as well. Now, a little more detail on how far this group has gone. It's more than just cross-promotion of the wine tour, as it were. They have partnered with some of the different visitor contact points along the way to make it seamless for the traveler. So, for example, they refer to this taste and tote. Well, basically, and I'm going to read directly from their site, what this is that it says typical visitors who want to take wine home after visiting wine country are charged a per case baggage fee by the airlines. Likewise, they're charged a drop-off fee if they rent a car at one location and drop at another. Well, the Taste and Tote program will help alleviate those issues for all people that have the Alaska Airlines mileage plan. And members flying out of these 3 cities will benefit from not having to pay these fees, and so on and so on. And they've partnered with Hertz Rent-A-Car, and they've partnered with a number of others along the way. So basically, if you sign up, not only do you benefit from all these perks and reduced costs, but you're going to also have a seamless approach to how you work. It incentivized the travel. Another example here is a little bit different of an angle, but an interesting one for sure. It's less about promotion and marketing or packaging like the previous example, but it's more about working collaboratively to build a new tourism vision focused on sustainable practices, which recognize a community approach as the catalyst. This group is based in Africa. You can also see, the messages on how the world has changed slide are really embodied with what they're doing here. It also reminds me a lot of the work we've been doing with the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada, who have similar aims around their sustainable development initiatives and their accreditation program they will be rolling out later this year. So Fair Sayari means fair planet in Swahili. And basically this group partners with local tourism industry to help with things like doing research or baseline assessments to help them build plans, building strategies, designing workshops to help them through reaching these goals. So community-based tourism is a type of tourism where local communities invite tourists to their communities. They give them insight into their culture and their daily lives. It's a form of sustainable tourism that allows travelers to connect closely to the local community they visit. And this group helps those organizations and businesses reach those kinds of goals. So it's kind of building right on the resources that are there, but doing it in a way that is sustainable and matches the same objectives that business owners and the community have jointly. Another example I have here is really to draw your attention to the World Tourism Organization's information and tools that pick up on a lot of the messages from today's webinar. Even at a global level, COVID too has spurred on the understanding of how the sector needs to, in many ways, reinvent itself. And this resource has a few recommendations on it. There's a few that I've listed on the slide, those 3 items with the dashes at the top. Now, this item alone, by the way, this whole topic of what the UNWTO has produced could easily be a full webinar, and I do encourage you to go check out the website. It's powerful in setting a clear argument on the need for community-led approach, and they've got some good recommendations. Just to briefly quote from them, I'm going to read a few of their headers on why these are priorities or what they've structured as the priorities underneath this program. It's really about mainstreaming a global agenda to advocate on the value of tourism as a socioeconomic driver. It's to help improve tourism competitiveness. They go on to say excellence in areas such as policy planning, statistics and market trends, sustainable tourism development, marketing and promotion, crisis management, product development. If you recall, those very themes came up in the last webinar on the investments we need to make as part of our recovery. So again, there's much more to be said about UNWTO's information and tools here, but the focus in the end is really about building community capacity, working at a community level in order to manage our, what I'm going to call, new tourism era. Another example might remind you of something we presented last time as well. Flipping to a recent article, here is a good example of the move to different ways of working. One is to the use of shared workers, but also what I really find interesting here is the idea of shared space. So what that simply means is that at some points in the day, the hotel is used as well for food services, but another time of the day, it's used for another kind of service, such as using it for meeting and facility, like individual meeting spaces, co-working operations, they call it, etc. So there's a whole idea that we can repurpose the space as the day goes along. So that instead of several businesses trying to sustain and be open, they're sharing the overhead cost of managing one facility that effectively can do it all as they take turns with the utilization of the multifunctional aspect of it. The article goes on to use an example from a core who introduced something called WOJO, that's W-O-J-O, which is described as a line of what they called workspitality. That is spaces that combine dedicated workspaces and living spaces, such as bars, lounges, cafes, restaurants, that can be rented by the day. And they recently announced that they were expanding this program to transform guests and meeting rooms into mini offices for the idea of for small meetings. And these properties have also followed suit by giving something to what they're now referring to as work from hotel environments, or WFH environments. So, the bottom line is that this article goes on to say hotels gain not only from their share of the rental revenue, but also from the sale of food and beverages and possibly room nights, while co-working operators have the advantage of offering better furnished space and parking, meal and catering services, and other amenities. So there's a lot of benefits with businesses trying to work in one facility and offer multiple services if you design it correctly. Another partnership example to raise here is from another article. Here, I'm just going to quote a few statements from this article. It's from New Zealand, and here it's about partnership on the use of programming. So here the article says, working on the premise that COVID-19 pandemic is no time for business to go it alone, this aviation company has responded by putting energy into strengthening its partnerships. The owner goes on to say there's a new market of high net worth New Zealanders who usually travel overseas for holidays, but are now looking to spend their leisure budget in New Zealand. So we've reached out to our luxury domestic travel agents and said, your clients usually go offshore. How about we put something together for them here? And they did, with these interesting excursions. She goes on to say that there's an old saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. When you put your mind to it, that opens up a whole lot of opportunities to work with different people who've got similar products that you can tap into, and they can help you as well. So the article is very helpful in giving you an idea of the kinds of things they've done. And it's summarized with a comment from the owner. She goes on to say, we're looking at how we can cut through the domestic market and also keep our international context informed of what we're doing and letting them know we'll be here when they come back to us. The worst thing you can do right now is let your brain go blank. We're spending a lot of time and energy making sure our brand is alive and people are thinking about us, because if they stop thinking about us, well, then our business stops. And finally, one more example I have on some partnerships. Oh, sorry, there's two more. This one will also be very familiar to those that were in the last webinar. You will recall on the webinar, Creating New Revenues, we had an example very similar to this one. Here, these companies have adopted a similar community strategy. Effectively, what they're doing is using social media to engage consumers, both past consumers and new ones they're trying to attract, to help design new tourism packages. Like, this is called the hotel tester ideas. Remember that? The innovation is more than generating ideas. It's also about testing them in real time with real consumers and getting feedback to adapt. It's a business model that will far transcend the COVID era. So now we've seen this in a few places, not singularly where we did last time, but this idea is growing. Go to these websites, you will see what they're testing, how they're engaging people. The ideas they're coming up with may also be ones that spurn some creative thinking for your own ideas. And they're far more than just hotel-based, incidentally. Okay, moving along, one more point of a strategic partnership. Here, this has to do with a brewer. So this brewery is in a small town, and they were known for more than wine and spirits. But what they had to do is extend some of what they were doing there. They'd lost a lot of their business because their restaurants are all shuttered. And this is who they were relying heavily to buy their product, but they started to do other things with it. So they strategized with a new partnership with Hotelier. And by doing so, they've extended their season into October, and this is helping to contribute to the local economic development of the region and providing unique opportunities in areas that they didn't before. So this one may be even very more closer, familiar to you in terms of what was done. They basically look for new ways to expand their markets by expanding their seasons and doing new partnerships. So it's a simple example, but one worth looking at in terms of the article itself. So to summarize this section on partnerships, I just want to reinforce a few principles, some of these as key takeaways. And to begin with, I'm going to start with the list that's on the left. This is adapted from a site we found called heritagedestination.com. And they included on their site guiding rules for making tourism partnerships work. They talk about the need for ensuring that partners have some common shared mission or organizational purpose and values or goals. That when partners engage in work, that they really must be equal, that it's not one-sided. There must be enough of a demand and need for the other. That benefits must be available to both partners, of course, and potentially others. That it's important that there is some form of an agreement, however formal or informal. It really should spell out the kinds of roles, duties, financial commitments, timeframes, responsibilities that you would expect for the partnership to run well. That includes some very solid and good communications and the idea of being open-minded, as well as looking for ways to continually improve on what you started off with in your partnership. Think long-term, look for ways to change, adapt, improve. When it comes to joint promotions, if your partnership is focused on those activities, another tip they include is the need to make sure that there is a joint effort in the packaging or promotional stuff. This helps mitigate or eliminate the idea of confusion and makes it seamless for the consumer if they're seeing more than one business behind that packaged idea. And they include other details like making sure you are committed to the deadlines and priorities in your work plan and so on. Those are messages you would have seen in part of the presentation or you would have inferred from what we looked at. And I'm going to bring you back one more time to the original opening slide of partnerships, which went on to talk about why. Partnerships are a way to leverage resources and reduce costs or sharing of risks. It's a way to help you meet and work with other people. It's a way to grow your business and your business network. And there were 7 icons on that first slide, which talk about the kinds of alignment or common objectives that most partnerships are built on. Shared resources, shared expertise, shared costs, the idea focused on improved competitiveness or broader markets, the idea of enhanced position or influence that you would have, and the idea of shared risks, and finally on having strategic knowledge as a result of your engagement. Okay, we're going to flip into the second element of community that we talked about at the beginning, and that has to do with an example of community engagement going beyond helping you generate revenues or for business reasons. Let's look at how important community engagement is, and increasingly important it will be, towards the building of a labor market strategy. If you were listening carefully, there are mentions of this already, but we're going to elevate this message and broaden the discussion. I want to impress upon you that in the future, when you rely on looking for workers, you may have little or no choice but to do it in a community-led approach. Again, the new tourism businesses are going to need new strategies. And coming out of COVID, in fact, we will find ourselves in a more difficult situation trying to find workers and those with the skills we need than we had going into it. On the website, we have a workforce action plan checklist. Draw your attention to it with the image you see here, but we'll look at it a little more closely. What I've done is capture a screenshot of what's actually contained in that checklist. This is the beginning of that list. In many ways, this checklist is intended to be a general framework that businesses or a community or an association may use to guide their work on conducting a comprehensive labor market research and needs analysis survey. And of course, the reasons why you would do this is so that the research will inform a labor market plan, one that will help you get funding or make you or help you inform decisions on what you do with your investments, so that human capital development, which could include things like education, training, supports around mental health strategies, or needs that individuals may have that you need to consider, such as personal and family care needs. These are all things that are going to be real in our workforce now. So, this information helps get those plans on the table. It informs strategic planning for individual businesses, for communities, for associations. It informs the type of programs that may need to be developed. It identifies the resources for coordination or oversight of these strategies. Bottom line, you're going to need this stuff if we're going to try to recover. And hopefully this will also help communities and businesses tap into government funding that will help. This is one of the key strategies on the table. This approach, of course, basically requires the engagement of the community. Now, that list was longer than that single page. Here are some of the other things on that list. Now, I'm not going to read through this, but it gives you an idea of the kind of steps or actions that you would typically take. The focus of the information for any of these studies is really in three areas. It's to capture an understanding of what's happening, or the trends, if you like, around the political, social, and economic context, as well as getting a clear understanding of the labor market assessment. That's like the demographics and where things are going in terms of skill needs. And finally, it's on training needs and human capital development. Just what kind of supply exists, what do we need in the future? There are classic models around this. This organization has many that we can help share with you or help you design. But it's all about building a smart plan. Don't hesitate to reach out to us if you're looking for more information on building these models. And you can also check out the website, which goes deeper on these. Now, our team identified a very good example of how this type of labor market research is done and can work well. This is a study and strategy undertaken in Ontario. It's an excellent example of the community approach, and I really like the emphasis they've placed on the workforce issue. Let me read an excerpt from the strategy document. With a thorough understanding of the national and global labor market challenges, these regional partners identified a gap in intelligence at the regional level. Information in relation to the nature, extent, and cause of the labor force issues in Northern Ontario's tourism sector was limited. As such, a need was identified to develop detailed and comparable regional tourism labor force data with a focus on recruitment, retention, and skill dimensions. The goal of the LMI is to assess and understand the key challenges and priority areas, identify actions to enhance the labor market, and determine the future outlook and themes now and into the future. In efforts to understand the tourism industry's labor market needs, a research study was needed. The data collected during this process provides insights and clarity into the key issues and challenges with respect to labor and skills. The analysis of the data collected plays an integral role in the formation of regional tourism strategy to guide this industry. So that's repeating a lot of perhaps what I've said, but you got a really good example that you can look at, and it goes deeper. I've gone into the specific section in there that looks at the labor piece itself. So a little bit more about this document. The aim of this was to develop a greater understanding of the existing and anticipated labor force deficiencies and challenges. And so they have been able to use this to leverage funding, but an important strategy that ensured they were able to retain and build a vibrant community of workers. There is one really interesting finding, a key finding that they've identified. One I've talked about on many occasions, but I'm going to highlight, and that is that they also identified the need for improved coordination. They go on to say that this desperate nature of the tourism industry means that in a variety of areas, there are significant benefits to increased levels of coordination. The management of the tourism labor force is no exception, and so it goes on. This, I hope, is something that you'll think about carefully in your partnership efforts, because good labor market strategies are necessary as we come out of the COVID recovery. More of these kinds of plans will help bolster our collective ability to recover rapidly. Now, workforce challenges can be of many different types. The study I just referred to identified some key ones, supply being their main dimension. Just to wrap up this section, here's a quick fire summary of the kinds of things that a community does work on when it's a collective strategy to address workforce needs. Here are some examples. Now, this is something we're going to be talking about in some depth in our 5th webinar. That's 2 from now in December. So I won't go into this in much detail. But grouped underneath these 3 themes, the pillars by which most labor market issues are defined, you can see some of the kinds of topics or themes that communities could work on to address their issues. There are many challenges. COVID has been highly disruptive to this workforce. In our first webinar, we provided data that showed the hundreds of thousands of displaced workers. And we cannot start on this stuff soon enough. As part of the response to COVID today, it's also about the urgency in preparing for the emergence of this from COVID. In 12 to 18 months from now, we are going to have greater shortages of workers and skills than we had going into COVID. So if we don't get some of this planning happening now and resources in place, we will have a much, much slower recovery in hand. Finally, 1/3 category we talked about was the social media imperative. This is one more topic I'll cover today, although I'm going to be relatively brief. This topic is a good segue to our next webinar, which is going to be the subject of marketing for the most part, and we will pick up on this topic in more depth. Now, this is what you see here is a screenshot directly from the TourismRecovery.ca website. It's just me showing you a little bit of what the content is. This one's specific to the tab on communications. And of course, it's featuring how to use digital and social media effectively. There are a number of tips, a few articles for you to look at. The focus being on 2 main items that we have for you to offer. One is on tone and approach, and the other is on some website strategies. Now, our team found this gem. This is from Destination British Columbia. I'm going to read what it says on the screen. Word of mouth referrals and recommendations are the most powerful marketing tool in the travel industry. Simply put, social media is the word of mouth on steroids. Now, this, of course, gets at a lot of the tone and messages we've been talking about, that it is a community-led approach here, a social media approach. Their strategy aims to do several things. They have things like curating authentic stories about BC and its people so that they are compelling. They're reaching new audiences through different influencers by amplifying brands. They're growing engagement through some direct links with Destination BC social media community. They're fostering awareness with the local residents and visitors to build a stronger community link. They're empowering industry partners with social media tools, and they're training these people to produce good material on these sites. So this focus is not just business centric, but it engages the community, and it is a lot about making sure that it brings back the confidence of tourism being a key economic driver. The website had a number of tips in it. Here, for your benefit, I'm just listing a number of the items that were included under the message of tone and approach. And of course, these are just single line statements, but there is more meat behind them on the website. If you think of tone and approach as one of the things that to focus on with social media, our website goes on to say that there are some recommendations on how you do this. And these are some of the tips. Now, I'm not going to read them because I've read one slide for you, and I don't think you want me to read every slide. But it's more to draw your attention to this and hopefully get you thinking about this as a resource when you go back to reviewing some of your social media strategies. These examples, these tips are going to help you strengthen what you're doing and help you prevail as a stronger strategy, not just on your own, but as a community, which will help elevate some of the focus of your community as a destination for foreign tourism. Here's a really interesting example that we picked up. Granted, it's from the UK, but you probably heard about it in the media. It got a lot of coverage globally. And here it's Burger King with the headline in its Twitter about asking people to order from McDonald's. And it's lovely. It picks up on a key message. We never thought we'd been asking you to do this, but restaurants employing thousands of staff really need your support at the moment. So it's an interesting way to look at this in a more altruistic way, but it really hits home. It tells you how much Burger King is part of the larger community it works with directly, but how the community is important to its survival, how we all need to really get the community back on board in terms of seeing our businesses as an anchor to the economic engines in those regions. Of course, there's much more that could be said about this, but it's clever. And it reminds people that Burger King, if you're going to think about it from a social point of view, on how generous they are to talk about their competitor as part of their colleague network. The other item that was on this section of the website was on website strategies. I think there's endless examples around good tactics here, and there are several links on our website to examples of these. And anyone who's sophisticated with this stuff has come to know these well, or you've hired a firm to help with it. But again, good to go check it out if you're revisiting your activities in your virtual community, because the stronger you are in meeting these kinds of recommended practices, the bigger and stronger your reach will be. There are several tips that are noted on the site. There are 5 key ones that are mentioned. Target your markets, make it accessible and easy for people to consume the information. Make sure, if you can, include incentives and rewards. Those have become very important in these times of recovery. Be reachable and responsive in ways that allow people to access you quickly. And figure out whether the actions you're taking are working and adapt. So this is, again, the mantra of some of the new ways we have to work, whether it's virtual or not, but it picks up very much in the virtual environment as well. One example of a site that is quite rich with tips on the use of social media and is very tourism and travel centric, we came across from this digital travel article, again, cited in the deck for you to go and check it out on your own. They do include messages around merging social media marketing and give a bunch of tips on why it's important, on how you manage social media. Everything from the ways in which people are working with it today, like your visitors doing research before they go on a trip, customer service as being facilitated through this type of a platform, the ability to create more memories, and so on. Now, I put this in more as a bit of a teaser than anything, because next time with our webinar, we are going to get into some depth on marketing. Which brings me to a few wrap-up notes in the few minutes we've got left. There is, of course, much more on our website at TourismRecovery.ca, where you can get information on what's happening in terms of the labor under the research tab. You can look into the news tab, which has in-depth articles, and our bi-weekly newsletter, which features content there as well. And of course, the COVID site, which has some direct links to program information to help with things like relief programs and other matters to help you deal with COVID issues for the workforce. If you're not already subscribing to our newsletter, I encourage you to do so. Of course, it's at no cost. It comes out every second week. And Heather, our editor, does a bang-up job giving you most current information as she curates for this. We also welcome your articles on this if there's anything you'd like us to reiterate. Our website, the website that we've been referring to here is TourismRecovery.ca. This is a glimpse of what it looks like. You can see that there are 5 tabs where we supply information on communications, workforce, budget, marketing, and strategy. Part of what you can see in here, of course, is the webinar series, which you're familiar with, but there are the tools that you can download and work with. There's links to articles, and soon we'll be having additional learning content. With that in mind, I want to remind you that our next webinar is on adapting to new market realities. It is basically a focus on marketing activities. We hope you can join us on November 24th, same time, same place, same people. On behalf of the board, I want to thank all of you for participating in today's session. And tomorrow being Remembrance, we do want to leave with a note for those we want to remember. Don't forget the 3 W's: wash your hands, wear a mask, watch your distance. Thank you, everyone. We'll follow up with you tomorrow. And this time around, we're going to ask a little more feedback from you on how, what you'd like to see in these webinars as we move forward. Are they useful? Would you like different content? What are your priorities? Watch for a note tomorrow. Thank you.